What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another Week 10 college football preview, and we are headed to the Big Ten. We have an extremely impactful Big Ten matchup going down in West Lafayette this Saturday as we got the Goliath Killers in Purdue hosting the top three ranked Michigan State Spartans. And this game not only has major implications for the Big Ten, but also the college football playoff, man, as the Spartans right now are tied with Ohio State for the Big Ten East lead. And Purdue is only one game back of Minnesota out in the West. And both these teams have to continue to win. And this is a big win for both of these teams if it can happen this weekend to find a way to get to Lucas Oil Stadium for that Big Ten championship game. But right now, the Spartans are 3-point favorites in the game that kicks off at 2:30 p.m. Central Time on ABC, man. So let's set the stage before we get to the keys of the game. And it all starts with the Spartans coming into this matchup 8-0, 5-0 in the Big Ten. They're coming off an extremely emotional top 10 win over number 6 Michigan. And the Spartans look to continue the Cinderella run that they've had under Mel Tucker this season, all the way to the college football playoff. And this is a huge test for the Spartans, as now they're no longer the underdogs. They got the target on their back, and as we all know, it's a lot different. It's a lot different when you're the most wanted. When you're no longer the one hunting, you are the most wanted. And so we're going to find out how Mel Tucker's squad responds, and it all starts with this sneaky road game against the Boilermakers. Now, on the flip side, the Boilermakers come into this one 5-3, 3-2 in the Big Ten, looking for their second top three upset of the season. And the Boilermakers have a long history of being the Goliath Slayers, man. 9 wins over top two teams, which leads the country for any program ever. So if you can do that to top two teams, maybe a top three team might be an easy task for Jeff Brom's squad. But in all actuality, this would make Purdue like folklore legendary if they got another top three upset. Jeff Brom's team is going to step up to the occasion. They're not going to be afraid of the moment. So look out for this one. This one's going to be a great game to tune into at 2:30. Now, looking back at this series, man, it has a long history stretching all the way back to 1918, which is the first time these two teams have met up. And the Spartans currently lead the all-time series 36-28 with 3 ties throughout the history over the Boilermakers. Now, currently, the Spartans are in the midst of an 8-game win streak. The last Boilermakers win coming in 2006 in East Lansing. So it's been a long time, and the Boilermakers said, man, it is not a better time than y'all being top three in the country for us to get that first win. So everything is on the line in West Lafayette this weekend, but the stage is set. Let's get into some game action, man. The key for the Spartans, let's start here, could not be more clear. Anytime they are on my show, you know what it is. When you have the best running back in the country, you got to keep the ball on the ground with Kenneth Walker III, and you have to force this Boilermakers defense to stop you. They have the number 8 rush defense in the Big Ten right now, allowing about 140 yards per game on the ground. So the Spartans have to take advantage of that if possible this weekend. Over 200 yards per game on the ground for the Spartans, over 5.5 yards per carry. While the Spartans do live off of play action a lot, with almost 40% of their dropbacks are off the play action concept. So the run game plays a huge role in this offense being the focal point and also setting up the passing attack throughout the game. And y'all have to know his name if you've tuned into this channel, or if you're just a college football fan. It all starts with Kenneth Walker III. Almost 1,200 rushing yards, over 6.5 yards per carry, 14 rushing touchdowns, and why not? He also has a receiving touchdown, but he leads the country in yards per game, top 3 in rushing touchdowns, and he's one of the Heisman favorites right now, and he is by far currently, as I'm talking, the best running back in college football. And then, of course, you got the Jordan Simmons sitting behind him that's done his thing with about 200 yards rushing, almost 5 yards per carry, and he's kind of the rotational guy. But Kenneth Walker is the workhorse, and he also is the focal point of this offense. I'm expecting a heavy dose of Walker this weekend, especially coming off his 5 touchdown performance, in which he was the first ever player to rush for 5 touchdowns against Michigan in their program history. So Kenneth Walker is on a roll, and any key for Michigan State relies on Kenneth Walker running the football. Like I said last week, the offensive line uses a rotational method where they have probably 8 to 10 guys that could get snaps on the offensive line each game, and it's been working. They're one of the best in pass protection in the Big Ten, and they've paved the way for the number one running back in the country. So let's give Michigan State some credit here. But the passing game has been solid this year. Peyton Thorne might not have had the best game last week, but he has had moments where he's been able to make his plays for this team. Yes, he didn't have a great week last week, like I just said, but he made a handful of throws. Like the fourth down throw that he made, where he threw the fade route to the pylon, was absolutely perfectly placed. And he had a few other plays he made on crucial third and fourth downs that really helped the Spartans overcome that 16-point deficit that they saw against Michigan last week. But he's still thrown for over 1,800 yards, 15 touchdowns, 6 picks, and 2 rushing touchdowns. He's still top 20 in pass efficiency this season, which is a huge step up from where he was last year. And, I mentioned how often they use the play action. On play action passes, he's thrown for over 1,000 yards. His average yards per attempt jumps up to 12, 10 touchdowns, only 1 turnover off the play action, and 10 big time throws. So that is where Peyton Thorne really thrives in the passing game. And so this weekend, the Spartans have to run the football and allow Peyton Thorne to ease into this game against a very good Purdue defense. They're only allowing about 160 yards through the air per game. That is elite production. So for me, allowing Peyton Thorne not to have to carry this offense is the number one thing. This is a huge test for Kenneth Walker's Heisman campaign. They cannot overlook Purdue, and they cannot have an emotional win last week and a letdown this week, like we've seen team after team this year happen. This year has been chaotic. Top 10, top 5 teams have been dropping like flies. Michigan State has to be focused this weekend because Purdue is not going to be a pushover at 5-3, and especially in West Lafayette. Now, for the Boilermakers, it's the complete opposite. As much as Michigan State has Kenneth Walker in one of the best rushing games in the country, the Boilermakers passing game has been the sole focal point of their offense and is going to be the number one aspect that the Boilermakers are going to have to use to pull off this upset. It was the key with David Bell and Aiden O'Connell having just ridiculous numbers against Iowa. That led them to the top 2 upset. So the playmakers at wide receiver, Aiden O'Connell at quarterback have to be big time playmakers this weekend for the Boilermakers. When you look at how they're doing it, they're averaging over 300 yards per game through the air and about 80 yards per carry. 80 yards per game on the ground. They have the third best passing attack in the Big Ten. And there should be some opportunities this year. Cade McNamara had a huge game last week, and Michigan State's defense is allowing over 300 yards per game. So this could be a huge matchup to watch. Can this Michigan State defense get enough stops? And can that defense play that bend but don't break style of defense to avoid the upset? This is a stylistic matchup that a lot of people are worried about, and a lot of people are picking Purdue for the upset. There's been a lot of people that have been reaching out to me talking about if we were going to cover this game and everything like that. Well, a lot of people have this game as their upset alert of the week because of Aiden O'Connell and what he's been doing over the past few weeks. Over 1,500 yards passing, a 71% completion percentage, 9 touchdowns, 8 picks, and 1 rushing touchdown. Him and Plummer split some time earlier in the season, but he's number 1 in the Big Ten in completion percentage. He's 6th in yards with only 7 games that he's played in, and he's only started a handful. So Aiden O'Connell has been getting better and better throughout the season, and 2 of his last 3 games have been his best. And he really thrives in his short game. I talked about, Thorne working off the play action. O'Connell can really make plays in the short game because they can trust their playmakers at wide receiver. They have some ballers out at the wide receiver spot that we're going to go over in a second. But when O'Connell can find his rhythm and distribute the ball to his playmakers like a point guard in basketball and let them make the plays in space, that's where this offense thrives, with almost 50% of his passes coming at 0 to 9 yards down the field. And on those short passes, he's completing 85% of them, almost 700 yards passing, 5 touchdowns, and an 81.4 passing grade. And they've generated over 43 first downs off these short action concepts. And the wide receiving core for the Boilermakers might be one of the more underrated units in the Big Ten, in my opinion. They have multiple guys this weekend that can be the star of the offense. 4 different wide receivers have 3 or more touchdowns this year, and these guys have to have a big performance for the Boilermakers to pull this off. When you look at the past few upsets they pulled, David Bell had a legendary game against Iowa, and then of course, you have that historic Rondale Moore moment when they upset Ohio State in this exact stadium in West Lafayette. So don't sleep on this wide receiving core. And it all starts with a guy who I think is probably a top 5 wide receiver in the country, and that is David Bell, man. 53 catches, over 780 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's the number 1 receiving yard per game leader in the Big Ten, and he leads the Big Ten in catches per game as well. This guy is a playmaker. He's probably the next star wide receiver coming out of Purdue, as they've had, with Rondale Moore last year, they're really setting a standard that they're going to have a wide receiver that's going to be big time in the NFL. And then you also have Payne Durham, over 300 yards, 4 touchdowns. Milton Wright in his own, I almost said in his own right, but not to be, not to be play off the name, but in his own right could be the next guy up. A lot of people think he's the next guy to follow Bell and follow Moore to the NFL. Over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. And TJ Sheffield, also another 3 touchdown guy in this wide receiving core. They have to go make one-on-one plays. You got to take advantage of if you have the matchup advantage, you have to take advantage of it to pull off a top 3 upset like Purdue is planning on this weekend. They have to be consistent. O'Connell has to avoid turnovers, and these wide receivers have to go be playmakers on the outside and go make plays in space. And if they can do that, Purdue's going to have a great chance to win this game, and you can see a replication of what they did against Iowa through the air. Now, the matchup to watch, a lot of people think it could be Michigan State's defensive backs against Purdue's wide receivers. Some people think Michigan State's O-line against Purdue's D-line. But for me, it's really Purdue's offensive line against the defensive line of Michigan State, because this Boilermakers game plan revolves around O'Connell having times to make plays through the air, while this Michigan State front seven has been one of the better teams of getting to the quarterback. I mean, this is going to be a really interesting matchup to watch, because it's really strength versus weakness. And I always try to pick one of these, and I think it's going to really determine the game, because the Boilermakers offensive line has really struggled at times this season. They're ranked 13th in the Big Ten in sacks allowed, with over 23 allowed, only 2 better than Iowa, who's ranked dead last. And right now, they've allowed almost 75 QB pressures over 8 games. And when you look at this offensive line, Tyler Witt at the guard spot, Spencer, I believe it's Holsky at the guard spot. They've been the 2 best offensive linemen, only 3 combined sacks allowed, only 22 pressures combined. But the offensive tackle spot has been the question marks. All these offensive tackles are going to have to step up against some powerful and talented edge rushers for the Spartans this weekend. And the number 1 reason why is O'Connell is a different quarterback under pressure. In that Iowa game, they did a great job of protecting him. He was able to establish his rhythm, make plays down the field, and put some pressure on an Iowa State defensive backfield that was really banged up, with Riley Moss and those boys being out of that game. But under pressure, O'Connell's completing less than 48% of his passes. He only has 150 yards passing under pressure, 4 yards of completion, no touchdowns, an interception, only 7 first downs generated, and a 42.3 passing grade. That is not going to get the win this weekend over Michigan State. So the number one thing Purdue has to do is to protect O'Connell in the pocket and somewhat try to establish a run game so Michigan State can't just pin their ears back and get after O'Connell. So this is going to be an interesting matchup to see how they handle this Michigan State D line, who, let's get into them, ranked second in the Big Ten in sacks. They only trail Ohio State by a handful of sacks to be number one in the conference. And the key this weekend will be getting to O'Connell. Don't let him establish himself comfortably in the pocket, force him into some major mistakes, and give the Spartans offense some extra opportunities due to turnovers. They have a handful of guys that can make plays. Before I get to the D line, Quavarius Couch at linebacker has been one of their top pass rushers, but just he is one of the best blitzers in the country, and he's all over the field. One of the leading tacklers with 65 tackles, one of the top graded pass rushers on this team, according to Pro Football Focus. So let's give Crouch his due, going to probably be an All-American linebacker this year. But when you look at this defensive line, Simeon Barrow at the D tackle spot, 3 sacks, 15 hurries from the DT spot. That is huge. He's been a key to this Mel Tucker defense. And then also Jacob, I believe it's Panusk, 7 sacks, 37 QB hurries, according to Pro Football Focus. This kid, the highest graded pass rusher on the entire team, he is a problem off the edge. And if Purdue doesn't account for him, it's going to be a long day for the Boilermakers. And then they also just got a bunch of guys who can get after the quarterback on this front seven. So the key here with this matchup is if Purdue lets O'Connell establish himself, be calm in the pocket, be efficient, and lets him distribute the ball to his playmakers, Purdue has a great chance of pulling the upset. But if this front seven gets to the quarterback and that Purdue can't lead on that run game, they're going to be in a lot of trouble because you cannot become one-dimensional, because I think Michigan State's going to run the ball, control the clock, and try to keep this Purdue offense on the sideline and really shorten up this game. So this is going to be an extremely important matchup to watch Saturday afternoon when these two teams, meet on the field. But for my prediction, I've really went back and forth. I've never been afraid to pick upsets on the show. Last year I got called insane for picking the TCU over Texas and Iowa State over Oklahoma upsets last year early in the season. But for me, I just don't see how Purdue is going to sneak up on a Michigan State. I think they're going to come ready. Yes, it was an emotional win last week, but I think right now Kenneth Walker and this team have so much momentum in the season. They're rejuvenated seeing them at third in the college football playoff poll. I really love Mel Tucker as a coach. I think he's going to have this defense ready to play. I think they're going to get after O'Connell, force him into some mistakes down the stretch, and I expect another big day out of Kenneth Walker. And for me, I don't see Peyton Thorne making the mistakes he did last week. So I have Michigan State winning this game this weekend 34-24 over the Boilermakers in West Lafayette, in a big road win for the Spartans, a 10-point win for the Spartans here on the Bluebloods. But guys, I appreciate y'all support, man. Y'all the best subscribers out there. I got to get a nickname for y'all, but listen, man, hit that subscribe button if you're new. Comment your score predictions and takeaways of this game below. Let me know what you're looking for, players to watch. Just give me your take on the game. I'd love to hear what y'all are thinking. And like I said, I got a 10-point win for Michigan State this weekend, 34-24 over the Boilermakers. But guys, we'll be back with some more game previews to end off the week, man. As y'all know, the best college football content found right here on the Bluebloods. Y'all aren't going to find better game previews, better recaps, better live streams. We got it all here, and we got every level of college football. So I appreciate y'all so much. If you're looking for more Week 10 content, click the playlist at the end of the video. But until next time, guys, the Bluebloods are out.